Welcome to the Utah Senate, our press availability. We have Senator Iwamoto coming to answer any firework questions, so we'll wait till she gets here. But in the meantime, do we have any leftover questions? Any questions to start?
Not right now.
We'll turn the time over to the media for any questions.
Well, story of the day is John Stannard, and the House leadership for now isn't responding to that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
Well, I saw the article in that UK publication, and I don't know what else to say.
Is there any response the legislature needs to make to that kind of action by a former state lawmaker? I mean, is there any kind of remedial training or reminder or anything?
Well, if this isn't reminder enough, hopefully this will be. If the question is this pervasive, I would say no. And obviously this wasn't done here or around the Capitol. It's probably done in his personal life somewhere, and so people have their personal lives, but got to be careful when you're a legislator.
Well, he apparently used a phone. It's not clear if it was a state-issued cell phone or it's this cell phone number that was listed in the official directory. Is there concern about using that? I mean, is that something people need to
Well,
know?
I think we have policies on our phones that they are allowed for personal use, if that's the phone you're using, and maybe there is a consideration there. I think if this was an ongoing problem, I think this is more of an anomaly, and I think people get that. I don't think we need to have special instruction.
What about the hotel? Those dates aligned with days that he would have been in town getting a state-paid or state-reimbursed hotel room for legislative business. Would you like to see that money repaid if it was funded by taxpayers?
Well, is that established? I don't really have a comment until we find it, until that's figured out. I don't really have any comment on it.
But if it is established that that was a state-paid room, is that an issue that needs to be?
Yeah, I think it would be an issue. Senator Iwamoto, you want to talk about your fireworks law that you
Sure.
passed today?
Yes, so last year was a treacherous year, dry and hot and windy. And so Representative Dunnigan and I both had filed, and other legislators, for firework legislation because my district, I had more calls than I've ever had before on this issue. I've had it through the years, but this year was a exceptional year. So we decided to work together. We brought a lot of stakeholders together, constituents, law enforcement, fire, UFA, cities and counties, and retailers and firework manufacturers. And I think it didn't please everybody, but we came together, we asked what they wanted, each city and everyone, and they came back with written responses to us. And we sat down and went through every single response that we had and came up with a good step forward. It doesn't, it's a statewide bill. So some counties wanted all fireworks, some wanted to ban, some wanted to ban aerials, some wanted to jumping, these different kinds of fireworks. So we came up with a solution. We cut the days by 40%, and everybody agreed to that. And then we did areas, we gave more local control because there's areas where there's a historical for 2 out of the 5 years that they can determine is areas that are dangerous, and cities have the ability now to ban in those areas and to ban it in a way that's it can be described easily to the public. And some other areas that the fire marshal told us were dangerous, so we did that with 200 feet on both sides. And then maps would be given by the municipalities to the counties, so those would be at the retail areas so that people would know and be able to identify the areas. We did some increase in penalties for people that disobey the discharge. And then in the areas where it's always been restricted, we made this more strict liability. So law enforcement said it's too hard to prove these areas, so we instead of having to prove negligence and reckless and intentional, we now made it strict liability. So if you did it, you're responsible, and you're responsible for the damages. So that about sums it, but there was a lot of work that went into it. And even in Cottonwood Heights, the mayor was there on all of that was where there was a lot of problems. And he was at the table the whole time, and they felt it was a good compromise. So.
Is it Mayor Cullimore or the new mayor?
The new mayor.
Okay, Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions for Senator Yamamoto? Seeing none, roll call vote.
You're getting in the rhythm of things now, President.
So the environment, what will we see different then?
In the environment, I think.
Just, I got a lot of phone calls, my constituents would have a lot of
Yeah.
questions. What's gonna be different now that this law goes into
I
place?
think a lot of people, I had responded to my emails and everybody has, but I think the maps that the counties are gonna provide, and they're gonna be at all the retail areas, and they're gonna have to notify, and the 40% cut in days, I think that's gonna be important. And I think we've had so much people calling us and stuff, so I think through the newspaper articles and things that everybody should kind of have a better idea of what restrictions there are.
The fireworks, though, are not restricted, they'll be the
No,
same.
the fireworks, we couldn't come to an agreement. Some wanted to ban, it was interesting because different cities, even in Salt Lake County, had different issues with aerials or something else, and then we have to remember we're statewide, and so we have to respect people that want to discharge also, but, so we're gonna look at that and see if that's an issue, but that part we left alone, and all the cities in that agreed that let's see how it goes.
So this is a tough issue, but even though we write statutes and the cities write ordinances, and it's really hard to enforce. But you try to set guidelines, but you would hope that the public and hopefully everybody wants to celebrate, and obviously the times that we allow these are times that ought to be celebrated, that you just are respectful of people around you. And I think if a lot of people, if they just remember that, especially look at their clock and figure out what time it is and how, what you're doing to your neighbors, or look around you at the environment you're doing this in to make sure it's safe. Hopefully, if people would use good judgment, we'd have a probably less statute.
On the 24th of July, we were at Jordan High School to watch, well, I guess it was the 4th of July. It was Sandy City fireworks. And we went down there. Jordan High School sits up above where they do the fireworks, so we were going to watch them there. And I looked out over the valley, and it was the whole valley was lit up.
I know.
With fireworks. It was pretty neat looking, but it's amazing what's going on with fireworks.
I think the good
And-
news is
really
the fact
popular.
that they got the enforcement in there. Because I think the frustration with people and the localities were the fact that we have this law in place, but we have no enforcement mechanism.
Yeah.
And now we have that.
And the strict
That's-
liability part, I think that's important.
Troy, yeah, that is important. Questions from our viewers?
President, this question is directly for you. Do you personally support the Convention of States resolution, and will you encourage the Senate to run and pass this resolution this session?
Personally, I'm in favor of the Convention of the States resolution. I want to get to a convention, and almost any way we can get there, I'm in favor of that. We've talked about here in this media availability about a little bit of the reticence that the Senate feels for term limits, but that's something that probably could come up in in a convention type of situation, and so I'm all in favor for having that discussion in a convention, and I think we should move forward and be on record. I think there's some momentum going with the Convention of States, COS approach to this, and it would be good to join with other states, because I think we need to get to a convention to stop federal overreach. Anybody else?
I think the one thing is my response would be, the president has the ability to place it before us, but he doesn't have all the votes. He doesn't control the vote.
That's correct.
That's what democracy is about.
Yeah, thank you.
We're past the filing date, but I also support it, voted for it last year. And I think it's important that we try to do what we should do as states, and that's exercise the rights the Constitution has given us. And to hold a convention is one of those rights. And I think it is late in this session, so it's a question as to whether anything will be done this session, but I think there's gaining support. The Convention of States, the confusion was over term limits and how that could be handled if we voted for it, whether we're voting for term limits or whether we're not. And I've got colleagues who are concerned about that don't support term limits, but that's in the Convention of States proposal. And we've talked about that a lot during this press availability, and there still is questions on their minds as to how to handle that, and that's probably one of the things that has to be addressed.
The thing I'm impressed about is how the grassroots effort, I'm hearing from a lot of constituents now about this, and I really applaud that and encourage the public, those who are in favor of this, to talk to their legislators. This is a big and important issue, and I'm just hearing a lot more about the Convention of the States approach. So
I think that's
it's getting legs, I believe.
very good.
It's getting legs, but there's so many different issues. It's not just term limits. It's not just a balanced budget. It's all kinds of different amendments that want to be done.
Yeah, there's three main issues.
And that could lead to a great complication of a runaway
Yeah,
convention.
And
And that could be very, very damaging.
I keep hearing runaway, but when you look at the bar they've got to jump over to be able to get a consensus on a number of states, and then you've got to take it out and have, is it three-quarters? of these-
Three-fourths, so 38
three-fourths of the
states would have to
that need
ratify
pass it,
anything they do.
ratify it. That is such a bar that is not even an Olympian can probably jump that. So it's a really high bar. It's just really tough. So I'm not worried about the runaway.
I am.
We do have a follow-up question. This viewer asked, do you see it as likely that the Convention of States resolution will pass this session in the Senate specifically?
Well, it's hard to say right now because we had pretty much decided that we weren't going to address it, but there's some renewed interest in it. And I think if we get enough votes, we'll probably give it a shot and see if we can get it passed. All right, any other questions?
I guess I've got a couple of cannabis questions. Have either caucus talked about a desire to legalize medical marijuana in the session, in the legislature this session?
We've not had that discussion at this point. I know there's a couple of House bills that are moving forward. I think we'll probably be discussing those as they come forward. To my knowledge, there's no bill that deals with medical marijuana or recreational marijuana in the Senate.
Not aware of one.
No, we haven't had a discussion in caucus either.
I think Representative Daw has some that deal with, you know, somebody who's terminally ill, but and a couple of others out there.
What's happening with the hate crimes legislation from Senator Thatcher? Is that going to get out of rules? Will that?
It is out of rules and in committee. It has been for,
Since day one.
was it day one or day
Yeah,
two? It was
day
right
one.
there.
Came
Why
out
hasn't
day
a
one.
hearing
It just
been
doesn't
held?
have the votes.
Okay.
In fact, I don't see it going forward this session.
And why is that?
Just doesn't have votes.
So it won't even get a hearing because and doesn't know, so.
Yeah.
It's probably up to the chairman and the sponsor of the bill to get that marked out.
Sure.
Which committee is it?
Judiciary.
And just to clarify, President, earlier you said it would be an issue if the allegations about the escort and the former state representative took place in a state reimbursed hotel room. When you said it would be an issue, did you mean that that money would need to be repaid? What would you want to see happen if indeed that happened, it took place?
Well, you're catching us right on the fly here. I think we need to find out I think that's definitely something that we'd have to consider or maybe even demand at that point, but it's just hard for me to determine that until we know what the facts are. It's hard to comment on allegations, and if the facts are there, then it's easy for us to say.
Given your background, wouldn't an audit be appropriate even now?
I think if we have some purpose for that, or some facts, or something that leads us that way, it's not anything huge, probably wouldn't take much to figure that out. Just, again, this is a new issue for us today. It's really hard for us to even we're still trying to figure out what's going on with, well, we know what's going on, but we're just, it's come as a shock to us, and
The one thing to
we're waiting to
remember-
hear more information on it.
Remember one thing, and that's the fact that this is a House member, and he is
No
dealt
longer.
with in the House as a House official.
No longer.
We would probably support whatever the House.
And
And that was my question, if there were to be any kind of look into whether taxpayer dollars were used for any kind of illicit purpose, is that something that the Senate could request, or is that purely a House function? That they have to be the body that originates that?
Could call for it.
I think we'd want to know the information, and he's paying a heck of a price right now, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's a heavy price, and bad judgment's not something that I think anyone condones. It's just we need the details on it.
But I mean, if there were to be an investigation of taxpayer dollars were used for something that is right now, under Utah law, a Class A misdemeanor, can the Senate request an investigation? I'm just looking for procedural process. Can the Senate request that, or does that have to originate with the House?
Well, like with most rules, if we don't use them very often, we get a little rusty with those, so I don't know what the procedure is. But I reflect what Senator Davis talks about, this is a former House member, and they're going to deal with it accordingly. And I think before we would ever get into that arena, we'd want to see what the House is going to do first. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, President.
Thank you.